Welcome to Perpetual Motion with Dr. Mo Anderson. My guest today approached me with one of the best pitches I've ever heard. She sent me this message: don't chat to me if you want to be bored about statistics and your audience is averse to entertaining stories about how to shine on every stage or how they can accelerate their communicative impact and find investors. But if you're keen on using my expertise in narrative and intercultural communication, let's chat. Now, folks, that is how you use engaging communication to get booked. You are truly going to enjoy Katja Schleicher of Germany today. She speaks 3 languages, has 2 passports, and she is a whiz at initiating change through communication.
You can't say Dr. Mo ain't tell ya that fear magnifies the consequences of failure. What are you scared of? Why are you afraid? I'd rather live like I'm dying than live to die any day. My heart is pure.
If you enjoy conversations with entertaining experts on lifestyle, self-care, personal empowerment, and positive relationships, you are in the right place, baby. My goal for every show is to elevate, educate, and motivate you in a manner that adds immediate value to your personal and professional growth. If you're new to the show or a returning visitor, let's make this official. Hit that subscribe button. Now let's have some fun with Katja, my new friend from Germany.
Hi, Mo. How are you doing? Thanks for having me.
Hi, welcome. I'm excited to have this chat with you across the big pond and to learn more about how we can make our communication more powerful and impactful, because we can do one and not do the other. And if it doesn't have impact, really, what is the point?
What is the point, right? Exactly. That's what you mean. Yes. And very often we just start chatting or talking without making ourselves clear what the point is going to be. And this is one of my missions in the work I do. And I'm very passionate about that on every stage, that I'm really trying to make an impact for all my clients, for every audience I speak to.
You've got an interesting profession, a great background. Tell me in your words what you do and why you do it.
I enhance the communication impact of people on any stage. That could be a very daily, usual talk to a colleague about a project, nothing confrontational. Of course, that includes as well negotiations. That, of course, includes pitches towards investors, towards stakeholders that want to know, why are you so passionate about this or that project, and why am I supposed to be an investor in this? So whatever it is that drives you, I'm the person who helps and supports you in finding the right words at the right moment, so that the impact of what you have to say can be accelerated by so many times. And that is when change is going to be initiated.
I like that. I like that. And the just adding that term acceleration to the communication and the power of words really kind of changes the light switch and the mindset for me, because we're always, I'm a language person, I'm a words person, and we take language for granted. But every conversation, as you say, we're should have a purpose. I mean, we're persuading, we're collaborating, we're selling, we're bonding. There's always a purpose, even if we're not thinking about it. That's really interesting. How did you get into this?
Actually, I didn't get into that.
Mm-hmm.
I was born like that.
I
if you
understand.
Could ask my mother, she would say, look, I don't know. She remembers me being 4 years old and doing that. Mm-hmm. And growing up, it was always my strong suit. So over the years, I professionalized that. I went to university. I studied linguistics, psychology, German and English, literature and language. So I did all that. But it has been in my DNA forever. People always call that, oh, you had an early calling. And I think that is true. And very often, you hear about, oh, we all need a change and, the big transformation. And I still sit there and think like, no, I think this is the best thing I can contribute to the world. So I probably will keep doing that until I retire, whenever this is going to be.
Well, yeah, and we can't retire from our passions, so you'll just keep doing it. We'll just keep doing it because we love people and we love words. And yeah. I love the way you light up just when you're talking about it. And I totally get that being born this way, as Lady Gaga
Lady Gaga will put it like that. Yeah, true.
Born this way, or Beyonce, I woke up like this. It just is. And what a great thing to not to have to work hard at the thing that you're passionate about. Listen, one thing you said during our pre-chat was that there are masculine and feminine communication styles. Yeah. And I've heard that, but I haven't heard a lot about it and don't really understand it. Let's start there. How does that work?
First, what you need to keep in mind here when we talk about masculine and feminine communication patterns, that they have nothing to do with men or women. Mm-hmm. Although it looks like it, right? We think like, okay, a masculine communication style is something men do. It's not the case. It is in us. We combine both anyway. We were brought up with as well masculine styles and feminine styles. Somehow over time, one of the two makes us more successful. And as we are very lazy bastards, the other one kind of gets rudimentary. We don't use it anymore. And then all of a sudden, when we have a career, or when we are fully involved in our families, all of a sudden it looks like that we are lacking a good deal, sometimes 50%. Let's make an example about masculine communication pattern is if I'm telling you, do this now, right? It's a purely masculine communication pattern. Again, it has nothing to do with men or women, right? So imagine you being in a leadership position, leading a team, trying to motivate your team. And the only road you can go is that you tell your team, you do this now. Now you can imagine that with the Great Resignation and everything, you will not succeed. You won't succeed at all. Okay. You won't.
So that's kind of assertive and authoritarian, exactly. Direct. Okay.
So of course, there is a situation where you exactly need that.
Right.
Let's assume at the end of a project where you just pull together your last strength, and it's the last couple of hours, you need somebody who tells you, you do that now.
Yeah.
If you then at this particular moment have somebody, it would be very nice if you could possibly check on this. No, you wouldn't succeed either. So right. It's depending on the situation and on the purpose, what pattern is the appropriate one. And somehow, for social reasons, we think when you're a woman, you have to mainly use feminine communication patterns, asking, being nice. And if you are a man, that you should use masculine, but a masculine communication pattern. But again, it's absolutely not the case. We have all of this in us. We should act upon respective situations with the respective pattern. And then all of a sudden, do that now falls on fertile soil. So that's the basis of that. Feminine communication patterns are more circular.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You go around. None of this is good or bad. It is just more or less appropriate for a certain situation. And if we are in any position, you can be in a leadership position or not, if we are more aware of that and are able to broaden our experience and to broaden our portfolio here, and being able to react or proactively determine a certain situation, now that makes us more successful as communicators.
I see that. And also, isn't there an element of, I can see as time passes and you become more experienced, particularly when you're leading people, that there's an element of emotional intelligence too, that it's also dependent on the people and not just the situation, especially in those one-on-one encounters.
Yeah. If you have a team that reacts way stronger to that, do that now mentality, mm-hmm. Of course, you probably will have a higher range of using that particular one. And if you have a group of people, if give leadership to them, and they are way more in the circular, let's go slowly, let's take another round, let's see that we did not miss anybody, and of course. But in principle, my point is we need to assemble both communication patterns in us to be successful as communicators.
Okay. Well, how do you determine, for someone who might not be as intuitive, because I've been particularly in the South, where there's just a very particular approach to easing into business. I've seen some people come across as very abrasive. They're upsetting people, really not meeting their objective, even though they have good intentions, but they can't seem to tell that they're not being effective. How do you gauge whether or not the style that you're using is having the impact that you want?
There was two aspects to that I would probably want to focus on. One of them is, in every communication situation, there is context. And the more precise you are able to observe that context, to listen to other people, and to read between the lines, the more easy it will be to sketch for you, okay, this is the general situation I'm going to be in here, in this particular one. Mm-hmm. The second one is what I think is very helpful, that you see in what cultural cluster are you in. And when I say cultural cluster, it does not mean nationality, mm-hmm. or race. It could, for instance, be that you're working in a certain industry. Let's assume you be together with a group of NASA scientists.
Okay.
Now, in that particular circle, there is a different way of communication than, for instance, in a group of nurses, mm-hmm. right? And the more you are aware of that, and the more you are aware of the cultural, I always call it the communication culture, that is existing in that particular club, in that particular crew, the more easy you will be able to tune in towards the proper communication pattern, or to find the different, the proper examples that will speak to that audience. Does it make sense?
It does make sense. Is part of tuning in, particularly if you're new to a situation, simply just listening and observing interactions, listening to conversations to learn the culture? Because that's a hard question to ask. But is that how you determine what it is, or what is that based on?
A big part, really, and let's say something like 3/4 is listening and observing. Mm-hmm. And let's say the last quarter, don't nail me on the number, right, precisely, is something that I always call the between the sheets communication.
Okay.
Right? There is a certain way people behave towards each other non-verbally, mm-hmm. or para-verbally It is a difference if there's a group of people where frequently someone says, or yeah, or that there is silence, right? Let's, just as an example, if you would go to a Nordic culture like Denmark or Finland, speaking per se is not the most rewarded thing you could do. So in Finland, you probably would never hear any, I call it the communication glue, right? The little, oh yeah, I get it. You probably will hear that very, very, very little. You might be lucky when a Finn says to you, yes, end of story. And then you have to take that, and that's it. While in another culture, let's take the Italian one, or any South American culture is similar to that, where there has been a long history of oral tradition, right? Where it's important to give tiny little twitters, tiny little feedbacks in between, right? It could be with
the call and response reaction.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's more a sound than a word. And that is for me the last quarter in understanding how the cultural cluster you're at this moment tuning into is structured. Let me put it like that.
Got it. That's interesting. You brought something to mind from when I was speaking in Wiesbaden, and we had a room it was half Americans and half German citizens. And the reaction between the two groups as I was speaking, I was so nervous, because the the Westerners were clearly enjoying what I was saying, but the German people were just staring at me. And I was like, oh my goodness, I am just blowing this. But then when I'm done, they all jumped up and clapped.
Exactly.
I was so surprised.
When I was working with, I work frequently with people who come from the States, and they have to give presentations in Europe, wherever. And one of the first things I always tell, or sometimes even preach, is like, look, nobody ever gives standing ovations here during a speech. Not because we do not like what you say, because it's just not, we want to digest first.
Right.
Yes. So usually if you're in we always call it the Anglo-Saxon way. It's that you start your presentation with something like, okie dokie, here's my thing. Here is what we found out. And this is what makes me enthusiastic. Right? So you start with the adventure and with the cool thing. And of course, logically, you expect the audience to react like, yeah. And then you're totally disappointed when you're from the States, when people do not react appropriately.
Just a very blank face, like, I'm attentive, but go on.
Oh, crazy. It's crazy. So let me tell you what happens. What happens is that, especially in Europe and Italy, we call it the classical didactic way, where you usually turn it around and say something like, okay, we did research on this, and we tried that, and we found out this, and 1, 2, 3, and the conclusion of all of that is da-da-da-da. So you end with that. And while you spilled your beans already in the beginning, people from a German audience, for instance, or other European audiences, they sit there and wait, and they digest, they process what you say. And that makes these blank faces you are staring in, and you feel like totally left alone on stage, because oh my God, nobody reacts to what I have to say, and I'm so cool, and what I have to say is so cool. Yeah. But if you know that,
right,
you're already happy with a tiny smile on the face of a German person in your audience, right? This is the fascinating thing about culture. We
It is.
highly,
It is.
we do not believe. We do not, and I'm speaking here for the European part. We do not believe when we are 2 minutes into our talk and someone stands up and cheers. He was like, wait, you haven't heard anything yet. How could you know? While in the US, people say,
Right.
yeah, this is a cool thing.
And
right?
we're like, if you thought that was good, just hang in there. I've got more.
And we are totally scared. We are totally scared when we are in an American audience and they say, whoa, well, let me explain. Let me explain first before you cheer. And they're like,
What is going on?
Oh,
What,
so
and see, that gets us hyped up. Yeah. But for people, and I have a lot of people who listen to the podcast because they are into communication and speaking, and we have a lot of great speaking experts like you. The big takeaway here is don't just learn the culture regarding food and yes, please, and thank you, but also learn the culture of the company and the group you'll be speaking to. And these things won't catch you off guard because it really threw me. I recovered because I had people there that I knew, but had I just had that German audience, I would have just felt horrible until the end when I found out, oh, they actually liked it. But you can easily research that, talk to people at the company, or go online and you can see people speaking in whatever area you're going to and be much better prepared. I love what you just said.
Even if you do not speak the language, don't hesitate. No problem at all.
Right. Really, really good tip right there. That's one to take with you, folks, wherever you're going, a company, another country, or whatever. Find out their communication culture. I find, Katja, that a lot of my personal power comes from being willing to give an opinion. And I don't have to be right all the time, but I'm willing to speak up based on the best evidence and what I know. But so many people lack confidence, particularly when it comes to speaking up in groups. Instead, they are silent. Why is being silent a problem?
Let me start with the point you were mentioning of that you consider yourself a very opinionated person. Yes?
Okay. I didn't quite use that word, but I'm willing to give an opinion.
Okay. You're willing to give
there's some negative connotation to opinionated over here. So I didn't. Now there are people who know me listening going, oh, you nailed it.
Okay. So, and between being opinionated on one side of the scale and one extreme of the scale and being silent on the other side, there is 350 shades of gray. Right?
Right.
And what I see, or what I often come across, is that people are afraid to even start getting out of the silence because they only see the other side. They see the other extreme. They see, okay, if I'm either silent or opinionated. And part of my job and my passion is it to encourage them to define for themselves how far, how fast they would want to go. But there is always a step forward. So that is why silent or being silent or remaining silent is an option, but way less frequently than we think. Much more often, we should take 1, 2, 3, or 500 steps, or sometimes we should be even very opinionated on a couple of things. But it's on us to scale that. Not scaling that is remaining silent. And I think this is one of the points that we could change so easily. Just define how big is the step you want to go, right? But not thinking it's either silent or very opinionated. Oh my God, there is so much in between.
Absolutely. And a lot depending on the environment too. I just hate, and I try to, when I'm in groups, some people are just naturally quiet and introverted. And I try very hard to get those people engaged because sometimes they have the most valuable insights and information, and it really hurts everyone for them not to say anything.
Now, here it's a very easy way to bring people who consider themselves more introverted than extroverted is to start with something silent. Let's write something down. I don't know if you know that, but it's one of the things I came across and I really liked it. At Amazon, there is many meetings that start with 10 minutes of reading silence. Did you know that?
10 minutes of reading?
Reading silence. Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. And I think this is great. This is great. Because what they came across was, people come little prepared to meetings, right? Or badly prepared. And that opened up exactly the room for the extroverts that were taking the lead, and we were chatting all the time and uttering their opinion at a very early point. So somehow they came up with that idea. So, okay, here's a paper. Everybody gets that paper at the beginning of the meeting, and there is 10 minutes of silent reading. And that is, I think it's a silent idea. I think it's so powerful because after that, everybody is on board. Everybody's on the same page, literally, right? And then you can start having a valuable discussion, even if you are feeling yourself or if you're considering yourself being an introvert. And things like that, again, this is the scalability too, right? Being silent is one side of the extreme. Being very opinionated and loud is on the other side. But there is so much in between that we very often do not tend to explore. And I can only encourage everybody to try tiny little baby steps wherever you're going to end up.
I love that. I was not familiar with that. Prior to stay at home and so many people going remote, I'd adopted the standing up for meetings and briefer meetings, which I found to be much more effective than going on and on and on, repeating ourselves. But the reading silence, what came to me as you were talking about that is, I think sometimes people, particularly managers who have a little bit more time to read and look over everything, forget how very busy other people are. And
the
it's like,
is, right? Exactly.
Right. I sent you that gigabyte of information last night at midnight. Haven't you read it? And it's like, but
obviously not, right? And there was no chance to do that.
There was no chance. And you want me to get all my other work done. I've got all these people reporting to me, all these fires to put out. So not only do I have a chance to read it and it's not obvious that I hadn't read it before, but also I get to center myself because they're rushing from meeting to meeting to meeting. And that works on so many levels, emotionally and intellectually. And I'm sure the outcome is much, much better. But Amazon is so innovative. I can't say, but them and Google, I've gotten quite a few ideas from and how to conduct really productive meetings. So thank you for sharing that. I didn't
what I like about that in particular is that it again goes into that you have to discover for yourself, for your team, what works. The worst thing you could do is taking things for granted. Let me give you another example. I'm a strong fan of not just having meetings, but already when you send out the agenda and when you send out the invite to teams, to the people you want to be at the meeting table or on screen, tell them what the purpose of that meeting is. And there is so much, all of a sudden, the meeting formats change. One of the meeting formats you could have, for instance, is what I call a dip meeting. Now, dipping into something really means, okay, we are 10 people, it's 10 minutes and everybody gets 1 minute. There is no chit chat, there is no socializing, there is no niceties, there is just, okay, guys, you need to know this about that. Next. If you know that up front, if you know, oh, this is the format, you're not going to be disappointed. right? Then, for instance, a completely different meeting format I like to introduce to my clients all the time is what I call the destiny format. A meeting format where either we have a decision by the end of that meeting, or we will die. Not literally, you know what I mean, right?
So I know what you mean. Yes,
there is pressure there. If you know that, and of course, if you have a meeting like that, of course you would not schedule that meeting for 30 minutes.
Right.
You would probably start this meeting and you would leave the end open, because it's either we find a solution or we will sit here until tomorrow morning, right? So, and if you address these meeting purposes totally differently, all of a sudden the expectation of people, what they bring and what they expect is totally turning around, and it changes our meeting culture for the better.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And no one's surprised. That's the worst thing in the world when you get there and it is a destiny meeting. You're like, wait, what? I didn't know that's what we were doing. Exactly. I'm not prepared. Exactly.
Yeah, I'm not prepared. And then all of a sudden your head is spinning and you think, oh my God, what if I would know? Why didn't anybody tell me? Am I a bad person? And then, the whole cascade starts. That is totally unnecessary.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
Right.
And then people are just talking. The talkers are just talking to fill up the emptiness, and it is just a colossal waste of time.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah.
Colossal waste of time. Great stuff here. Great stuff. What about, there are people who have tried to engage, tried to adapt their communication styles to put forth their ideas. And a lot of people feel like they have people around them. And I was just in a meeting about this, so it's a webinar about it. So it's high on my mind. They've tried to engage, they've tried to enhance their communication, but they get shot down. No one's receptive. And now they feel like nobody understands them. What can you do about that to and really I think it's on you, but to change your approach, or how do you reassess and not just, withdraw and be that person who's not really participating?
There is two things I hear you saying. One of them is being shut down. And the other one is being not understood. Right. For me, this is two aspects that could be tackled differently.
Okay.
If someone shuts you down, there is a reason for that. Very often there is ego involved in that, right? That someone thinks I am superior to you, I'm longer with the firm, I don't know, whatever reason that is. So that is why I have the right to tell you, yeah, we've done that and it's already solved, and you better shut up, young lady. So you are too young anyway, right?
Right.
Now that is one thing.
Okay.
Now, when this happens, there is in my recommendation, there's two things you could do if that happens more frequently, right? Thing number one is try to find in the group, in that group of peers you're working with, try to find supporters. Let's not call them friends necessarily, but people supporting, for whatever reason, your cause. And talk to them proactively upfront and let them say, okay, if that happens, and if someone shuts Mo down during the meeting, you are jumping in and support her. That very often I don't see happening. And
Agreed.
That's a shame.
Yeah.
Right? So that very often doesn't have anything to do with any content. Right? So if it comes down to, okay, I didn't quite understand what was said. Now, here I have to admit, is valuable feedback the best way to go? If you didn't understand what was said, there is a good chance that you ask good questions back, valuable questions back, that bring the person that for whatever reason couldn't be understood properly, gives the person the opportunity to rephrase it. What is important here is that when you ask those questions, that you are as precise as possible, as concrete as possible.
Mm-hmm.
If that stays in this vagueness and it's, no, I didn't quite get what you were saying, then you will probably shut the person down for different reasons. But if you say something like, okay, let's go back to your first two sentences where you said 1, 2, 3. I got 1, 2, 3. And then somehow you drifted off 2. And this is where you lost me. Could we please go back? All of a sudden, you are enlightening the path. All of a sudden, there is opportunity for the person who didn't, for whatever reason, express themselves properly to go back to that moment. And that is what I call conversational intelligence. Mm-hmm. All of a sudden, it's a give and a take. And that makes every dialogue valuable.
Good. And as well, too, what I like about that strategy is that you're giving them some reinforcement, because typically what I hear people say is, that doesn't make sense. I don't know what you're talking about. Something very dismissive, as opposed to, you can have a very great idea, just in the way that you proposed it, I didn't quite understand. It's more about me. There's nothing wrong with you. And this is what I understood, and this is what I did. And that's very good. I like that. And
you help, you show people that you care.
Right. And I'm listening.
Person. Yeah, exactly. So hold on a second. Until then, I was with you. And between there and there, I'm not following. Could be me, could be you. Let's talk about that. And all of a sudden, a conversation like that is not dangerous anymore, right? It doesn't feel like a threat. It feels like a conversation, and that is the way it should feel.
Because to the second part of my compound question, if you continuously do that to a team member, even a valuable team member, they will start to feel isolated and unsupported.
Absolutely. Yeah. And there is no reason to do that, right? Because there is so much expertise, there is so much knowledge in the systems of the people we that surround us, we work with. And imagine that knowledge, that expertise being shut down. Oh my God, how poor will we be, right?
Right.
No.
How poor will we be? And it leads to more turnover, because people only want to feel like that for so long. They want to feel respected and valued and like they're contributing. And if they're constantly getting shot down or criticized, especially in front of other people, that's hard. But that's sometimes the manager's just frustrated and they're under a lot of pressure. So there's so much dynamics there.
Right. And the more you make that visible, the more easy it is to talk about that, even if it is a little bit unpleasant sometimes.
Yeah. Getting comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yeah, exactly.
You advise us to lead with words. What does that mean? How do we lead with words?
In my world, right, in my upbringing, in the way I see us as humankind prospering, I think that when you use the appropriate word, it will trigger an emotion. And that is, if everything goes right, is the emotion you want it to be triggered. So that to me is leading with words, that the verb you use, the adjective you use, the example you bring is having a certain emotional effect on your audience. And if that is the one, that the effect you were aiming at, the one you intended to, then I think we can do great things with word. On the opposite, if we don't, we can screw up a whole project with one wrong word, right? I give you a very simple example. Let's assume we are a group of engineers, right? And we stand around these big drawing tables, right? And there is a technical drawing on the table, and we're having a discussion, and there is the senior engineer is coming into the room. And from afar, that person already says, oh, that distance is too big, pointing at a particular point in the drawing.
Right.
Of course, the whole project will fall silent and everybody will say like, whoa. Instead of doing that, going as the senior engineer to the drawing board and asking into the group, okay, what made you think about the distance between A and B like this? And get people talking. That would give you the opportunity to listen to the people. And afterwards, you could still say, okay, if that's the case, now then it's too big, right? But then this word comes at a way later stage. So with saying, okay, that is too big in the beginning, you shut down the whole thing. While saying this at the end of that conversation, it could be saving the project, right? So I'm a strong fan of the right word at the right moment. Yeah,
I agree. It's a mistake a lot of new managers make when they want discussion, but they start out with their opinion.
That is a good point. Let me quote you on that. Exactly. Right? You state an opinion instead of starting a discussion. Exactly. Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And then everybody just, restates, goes along with what the boss said. You don't get any new ideas, new thoughts about it because you've already said what it is that you want. And so, lots of fun, lots of interesting things here. We could go on for a while, but your time, I know, is limited. So I have one final question that just applies to the whole wide world. Yeah. And right now, building bridges has to become a priority for us globally, in our communities, in our workplaces, in our relationships. How do we build bridges between cultures with words?
By keeping ourselves in amazement. Looking not at what before we can talk about what we have in common. I love to talk about what is different in a different culture. Because that is the reason why, for instance, we travel. One of my most fascinating places, I really, really like to go there, is Hong Kong, or has been Hong Kong. And being in Hong Kong, where everything is so different, right? People move differently. Everything is different, and acknowledging and appreciating that place being so different makes it valuable. And after that, after that amazement, I am able to find all the things we have in common. And this is to me, this is the thing, find the amazement, not the conflict, but the contrast. Let's talk about what is different and talk about that, not to separate each other,
right,
but to afterwards bring it together. But to be, wow, you do it like that. Oh, this is an amazing building. This is an amazing way to cook, to eat that food, or whatever it is, right? I think first to appreciate what is different and then come together. To me, this is a good way to build bridges between cultures and clusters.
I agree completely. The beauty and the value, and would encourage people to travel your city, travel the country, travel the world, and interact with other people and with other cultures, as you said, with that sense of amazement, and it will really change your perspective, your outlook, and you'll be a lot more optimistic about what's ahead.
So when you travel into your next meeting, into your next conversation, think about it exactly as the same as in traveling to Hong Kong or wherever you think is the most famous place in the world. Mm-hmm.
Yes, well said. Before we go, my friend, tell listeners how they can connect with you, what services you offer. So I know a lot of people will want to engage with you after hearing these valuable tips and tools you've provided today.
Now, first of all, for the American folks, of course, I teach and I support American presenters on European stages, right? That's one of the things. What I do as well is, of course, I support teams in making their conversations becoming great conversations. Mm-hmm. I support speakers in becoming great speakers on every stage. It doesn't matter if you're invited for a media interview or for a TEDx talk or for a plenary discussion, depending on. So I'm always at your side and I'm preparing with you the messaging, the delivery, and the stage presence. So this is what I do. I do that in 3 languages. And if you want to connect with me, it's very easy. There is a couple of ways. Of course, I'm on LinkedIn, right? There's only 2 people with my name on it, Katja Schleicher. I'm easy to find. I live in The Hague. And my website is interview-training.eu for Europe. That is helpful as well. You even find me on TikTok. I consider that a funny thing. So I start playing around with TikTok a little bit. And of course, if you want to see my speaking page, it's katjaschleicher.com. Very easy. But type into Google Katja Schleicher The Hague, you'll find me.
All right. We'll drop those in the show notes. I'm sure you'll be hearing from some Americans, and we do have listeners in other countries as well. So I really, really am thrilled and encouraged by what I've heard today and look forward to continued communication with you. But most of all, thank you so much for this engaging interview.
Mo, it was a pleasure. It was an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
And wasn't that a great program? Oh, love that episode. I enjoyed it. I hope you did too. Please remember to like, subscribe, and share. Learn more about me on my website, drmoanderson.com. That's MOE. You can read book excerpts, watch videos, learn about my services that I offer, and book me for a speaking engagement. I'd love to talk with your group, and I'd love to work with you. So until the next time, review, renew, and renew. Thank you.